Welcome everybody. My name is Jeff Davis. I'm here with EDLE 6063. The man in front of you, that is Dr. Calvin Coolidge Green. He is the main focus for the Green versus County School Board of Kent County Supreme Court decision 391 U.S. 430, decided in May 27th of 1968. Alright, so look at that. High Court bans segregation in public schools. So let's go ahead and point out the fact that there's segregation, desegregation, and integration. Alright, segregation was the concept of free and separate but equal, which, let's be honest, resources and funding, that ain't happening. And then there was also desegregation, which said that school districts in the United States needed to take action in desegregating their districts. Then there was integration, which is characterized by the successful blending of races within school systems, which that didn't happen very quick. Okay, if you're anybody from Texas and you're a fan of the University of Texas, you know that that didn't happen until 1979. What's that? What? 1979? Well, that's crazy, right? Because in Brown versus Board of Education 1954, there was a decision made, unanimous Supreme Court decision declaring separate but equal education facilities for racial minorities as inherently unequal, and such segregation violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Alright, so let's explore this further. Alright, so let's see here. Let's see if I can do this. 1965 minus 1954. That's 9. Is that 9? Yeah, 9 years. 9 years had passed since the initial passing of Brown versus Board of Education that said that segregated schools was a violation of the 14th Amendment, but Kent County Schools was still basically doing that. Unfortunately, Kent County's school system in Virginia only had 2 schools. They had the New Kent High School, and then they had the Watkins High School. Now, this is back in the 60s. High school, junior high, elementary wasn't really a thing. That was the school. And the New Kent School was recognized as the white school, and the Watkins School was recognized as the all-black school. So, looking at this map right here, you can see just a small little outline of New Kent County itself. So we had George G. Watkins Elementary School is what it's called today, but that same building was Watkins School. And then on the east side, you had New Kent School, which was way across town. All right, so they came up with this thing of freedom of choice. All right, so the freedom of choice plan said that students needed, outside of the 1st and 8th grade, annually needed to declare what school they wanted to go to. So in the first year that they did this in 1965, 35 students from the George Watkins School ended up making their way to the New Kent School. 0 kids from the New Kent School went to the Watkins School. So what's that mean? That meant that 35 African American students made their way to the all-white school, but no white students ended up making their way to the all-black school. So next year, 1966, there was 100 plus students ended up making their way from the Watkins School to the Kent School. But there was again another year where no kids or no students from Kent ended up making it to Watkins. So this school remained all black. And then 1967, again, 100 plus students over to the Kent School, no white students to the Watkins School. Ultimately, one of the main concerns that came across was the students that ended up going to the New Kent School that were African American were often harassed and ridiculed and bullied, but the staff and the administration turned a blind eye and never did anything about that. So the parents of the students that ended up transferring from Watkins over to the New Kent School was having to consider about the mental health and well-being of the students in regards to, do we want to successfully integrate our children into a more diverse school system, or do we want them to send them back to a school that's going to have a population that more reflects who they are, but they're going to have lower resources, not up to date textbooks, and lower qualified instruction. All right, so what happened? All right, so nobody from the New Kent School in those 3 years made their way to the Watkins School. All right, so think about this. With that freedom of choice, you had really nice school, and then you had the other school, which was the Watkins School, which with the desegregation and segregation and Brown v. Board, it was supposed to be saying that desegregation was inherently unconstitutional because it wasn't separate and equal. It was separate, but it was completely unequal. One school was getting better resources, better instruction, better staff, and one school was just basically getting by. All right, so that brings into the 14th Amendment, where it says, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, and property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. Now, what are we going to do about all that? So the Supreme Court needed to consider this. Okay, whenever it came down to it, the Green and the other parents ended up filing with the courts, and they affirmed freedom of choice was fine. Then it ended up going to the district court, and they affirmed freedom of choice was just fine. But then whenever it got to the Supreme Court of the United States, they ultimately ruled that freedom of choice plan was unconstitutional due to the lack of choice availability to the students. There was only 2 schools, but the Supreme Court of the United States also stated that if there was more choice, this choice plan could potentially maintain its constitutionality. So, SCOTUS unanimously decided in a 9-0 decision in favor of Green and ruled against the New Kent School Board, as a choice plan was not an adequate plan for successful implementation of desegregation. So it did not necessarily lay down the groundwork for successful integration. So with that integration, that meant that all races would have ended up in the same classroom. But did freedom of choice accomplish the purpose of Brown v. Board? Not necessarily. Not within Kent schools. All right. So Justice Frederick T. Gray ended up saying that he believed that the intent of Brown versus Board was to strike down those parameters outlined within segregation, but it wasn't necessarily telling districts and school systems how they were supposed to integrate. And so this would ultimately lead to a thing that is called the 5 green factors. Whenever establishing whether, and this is where courts would ended up using the 5 green factors to determine whether or not school systems were adequately integrating and moving away from desegregation. Okay, so the first one, faculty. Did the faculty reflect in both campuses that one was majority of African American or majority of white? Were they equal faculty and qualifications? And then the staff itself, so administration and the services provided. And then transportation. So were the students that went to the majority white schools receiving school bus transportation from all areas of their constituency, and then the majority of the African American students having to walk, maybe even miss, and then fall into issues with compulsory school attendance laws? And then the facilities themselves. Were students going to run down facilities that didn't have electrical that was really working that great? Was the plumbing equal? Was the resources available great? And then ultimately extracurricular activities. Whenever you look at extracurricular activities, one school might have had every single sport you could ever choose from. One school might have had football, but they were playing football with 10-year-old footballs and outdated pads and safety parameters within the game. All right, so within Green versus Kent, it ended up ultimately laying the groundwork for making sure that even though school districts had this option for choice so that they could try and balance the races within their district, they needed to ensure that even though they're balanced, they're equal. All right, again, my name is Jeff Davis. I hope you enjoyed this.